Welcome everyone to our Quick Takes webinar, Customer Development, How to Validate uh, your customer and get good feedback asking the right questions. So I'm Daria Duda. I'm excited to be with you here today, along with FI Keystone leader, mentor advisor Don Samoil, and our co-leader Bill Rifkin. And I'm going to share a couple things about Founder Institute before we get started with the official webinar. So let me just share my screen here. We'll get started. Okay, share. Apologies for the slowness of my laptop today. All good? All right.
Good.
Yeah, as I said, this is the customer development. We want you all to learn how to ask smart questions and get the right feedback. What we're going to be talking about, I'll just do a quick review of Founder Institute. I'll turn the floor over to Rhonda and Ryan. We do have a couple of interactive polls for our audience so that we want to hear where you are in your journey and what your challenges are. And there will be time at the end for lots of questions. If you think of questions along the way, please use the Q&A feature. My colleagues, Don and Bill, will be keeping an eye on those, and we will make sure that we get to as many as we can. And so for those of you who aren't aware or familiar with Founder Institute, we're 15 years strong, and it is one of the #1 place in the world to build a fundable company with over 6,600 alumni, tens of thousands of mentors and leaders around the globe. You can see there are over 100 countries and a total of 1.75 billion raised to date and growing. So there's chapters around the world, and we specialize in that pre-seed idea stage founder and startup to get you to the next level. So where you sit, where we are today is this Founder Institute, that initial traction. We do some education with Startup School and Startup Weekend. After you get out of Founder Institute, you are prepped and ready to move on to the next level, to Techstars or Y Combinator, and then get your seed funding. So this is the sweet spot where we sit to make sure that you're successful all along the way. But how does it really work? Well, first of all, we want people to come into the chapter, and we invite people to apply and become part of one of our 3 cohorts a year. That's just in this chapter. Of course, there's many chapters, thousands of chapters around the world. And what we do is we really set you up for success with a very structured 4-month-long program that takes you step by step by step to what it means to build that pitch deck, to build your business plan, to build your revenue and walk away with something that you can have your elevator pitch ready and get funded at the level that you need at that stage. But it doesn't stop there, because FI then, after you graduate, provides you a lifetime of support. Not only are we the largest startup mentor network, the mentors that are presenting today are just 2 of the ones that participate in the Philadelphia, Keystone, Jersey area chapter, but we have mentors from all around the world who chime in and participate and support our local cohort all along the way. So these people are really invested in helping everyone succeed. From a roadmap standpoint, what this really means, as I mentioned, not only do you get the 4 months of Founder Institute intensive hand-holding, office hours, weekly meetings with teams and our chapter leaders, but after you graduate, you go to Funder Lab with more of the same but all about getting you that lead investor and helping you get to that next step. And then after that, going into the venture network to, if you're interested in becoming that, doing the pre-seed investor funding. So there is, and after that, you have this enormous network of global contacts. Then you will become friends with, and you will be able to network with around the world. So here we are today. This chapter is set up to educate our local community and give you a peek at what's happening with Founder Institute. So we already went through positioning to differentiate, or no, we already went through 2 sessions. Today is customer development. Tomorrow, we have another one, positioning to differentiate. Next week, we have 2 more, building your dream team and pitch mastery. The following week, we have one for startup legal, talking about IP and trade secrets and everything in between. Our next cohort starts the week of April 21st. And we do have some sessions coming in between, before that, that's going to talk about, that we haven't put on the schedule yet, but we have other sessions. So keep track of our page on LinkedIn. Do the QR code here to tag our events page, and make sure you register for the events that you're interested in. So I'm just going to turn the floor over to I'm going to stop sharing, our wonderful speakers who have taken the time today to share their knowledge. We have Ronda Siegel and Ryan Long. And if you, Rana, you want to give a few bullets of trying to think of the right word to share with our audience about who you are and your specialty, that'd be great.
Sure. Great. Thank you. So I'm Ronda Siegel, and I'm actually really excited to provide some insights on customer development today. And so who am I? So I retired after a very long 36-year career at IBM. And I was very fortunate to have many different roles and opportunities all at the same company. My background includes having had leadership roles in sales and marketing and business development. And while I was at a big, large, multinational global company, I was in many different roles where I was often tasked with doing what I would call startups within IBM, startups within Big Blue. And we actually did quite a few of them. I was very involved in launching IBM's Watson SaaS platform, which was the first foray into SaaS. And I also was very involved in launching IBM's introduction into mobile and cloud and big data. These are all terms from a few years ago, but we were one of the first companies to get into these businesses. And today it's all about AI and everything else. Since leaving IBM, I've done consulting engagements with several startups, but more importantly, I've decided to take my time and energy and really focus on mentoring. For many years, I have mentored at Princeton University's Keller Center for Entrepreneurship in something called the ELETA program. I did that even while I was working. And then I was trained in a methodology by the National Science Foundation, which runs a program called iCore. And more recently, I've gotten involved with the Founder Institute, which is really an amazing program. So I'm excited to work with Ryan today, and we're going to give you some insights. And what I really hope is that many of you sign up for the spring cohort that's coming up. So Daria, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Rhonda. And Ryan, if you could just give a minute or two overview, and then I want to launch our first poll.
Yeah, thanks, Daria. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Ryan Long, and I am excited to be here with Rhonda. She has so much experience and knowledge to share, so it's a privilege to be alongside her. I'm a product and strategy leader, and my experience goes across B2C digital platforms, SaaS, and marketplace models. My background includes leading AI and machine learning driven product development at Nike, founding and scaling an e-commerce brand, and now as Chief Product Officer at On Purpose Studio, where we help startups and growth stage companies build scalable, user-centric digital products. One of the biggest challenges founders face, regardless of experience, is knowing whether they're building something people truly need before investing too much time and money. And that's what today's session is all about: how to ask the right questions, validate ideas faster, and avoid the common mistakes that lead to wasted effort. I'm sure Daria and Rhonda are going to say the same thing. We really want this to be interactive, so please feel free to drop questions in the chat, and please reach out afterwards with any questions that come to mind that we're not able to cover today. Back to you, Daria.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan and Rhonda. So before we get started on our official presentation, let's start with a poll, audience. What's the hardest part of customer validation for you? Please pick your single most answer. You notice there's not all of the above is not a choice. So pick one. Okay, it looks like most 78% participation here. So it looks like number one is finding the right people to talk to. And Rhonda and Ryan are the experts in helping you narrow that down for sure. Second biggest challenge here that was noted by our audience is knowing if you have enough validation to move forward. So with those top two answers in mind, I will go ahead and turn the floor over to Rhonda, and she'll go ahead and.
Okay, great. So I am going to share some slides to get us started. And okay, does everyone see that?
Looks good.
Okay, so just to get started, in customer development, it's really about focusing on what buyers want, not what you have to sell. And in working with a lot of startups over many, many years, the biggest challenge is everyone wants to go in and talk about their solution and all the capabilities and how this is going to help you. And whether you realize it or not, you're going into sell mode. And customer development is about learning and listening and trying to learn what the buyer's motivations are, what their needs are, what their challenges are. And that really often, it sounds rudimentary, but it's actually not so easy to do, because most founders and startups are really enthusiastic and excited and know that they have something for a marketplace. But this is a time when you kind of have to step back and really try and figure out what buyers need, and does your solution address this? So I'm going to go to the next slide, which it doesn't want to. Let's see. Okay, so as we talked about, this is about asking the right questions. And we'll get to finding the right people and enough validation in a little bit, but you have to ask the right questions. And as I just said, it's all about discovery and learning. And the number one thing you have to do is, as we say, you got to get out of the building. You got to leave the room. You got to get into the market. You are not going to get the right input if you're talking to other people in your organization or talking to people who've worked with you on developing your solution. You've got to, you know, come up with a set of assumptions and questions and start to talk to very specific target cohorts or customers and get their feedback. So the first thing I want to leave with you with is, you know, start listening, get ready to learn, get into the market, get out of the building, and start thinking about the core set of questions you need to ask. So then the next thing is, for the problem you're solving, you got to really start to think about, who do you want to learn from? Do you have a target market? Do you have a target persona within that market? What do you want to learn, and how will you get to them? And I can't begin to tell you how many startups I've worked with that when I look at them and say, well, who's your target market? Like their eyes glaze over. Well, you know, it's cross industry, it's cross role. You can't be everything to everyone. And if you want to gain some early traction, you might want to think about narrowing down on a target market. And then within that market, who is the persona? What is this persona's wants and needs? What's the pain point you're addressing? At the end of the day, getting someone to buy your product, your capability, your solution, whatever it is, it's got to have enough differentiators in that marketplace, and it's got to address the pain points that people are having, and it has to do it in a way that they're willing to pay for it. So at the end of the day, they got to be willing to pay for what you have to offer, which means that you need to really understand what they need and get to those differentiators really quickly. Okay, so I think you wanted at this point, Daria, to do another quick poll.
That's right. Thank you. All right, so here we are, another interactive question for you, audience. What concerns you most about talking to potential customers? Please pick one. We know you want to, again, say all of the above. Give you a minute or so to read those options. Thank you. So we have 11 of 14 of you have answered. Number one is getting concerned about getting misleading feedback, which is a true concern. Knowing if your customer is really telling you sort of the truth, right? And that will go down to making sure you're asking the right question and listening in the right way. So I'm going to end this poll and turn it back over to Rhonda, who is going to share a little bit more about those interview questions. Rhonda?
Okay, great. So on the last slide, which you may not have caught it at the end, but before you do the interview, you got to figure out, again, it's a process, you know, who's your target market? Who are the target personas? And then, you know, how are you going to get to them, right? You got to get creative, you know, go to trade shows, go to meetups, go to trade organizations, go to local businesses. There is always a way to get to your target cohort. and find a way to have what we'll call the interview. And in the interview, you really want to spend some time developing your interview questions. It's not something you should do kind of off the cuff. And I think, I would recommend having a mixture of what we call open-ended questions. The goal is to get your target persona to share, to talk to you. Again, this is about them talking, not you selling them on why they need your solution. It's about listening. And so you have to structure the questions so that you can kind of drill down a little bit about probing on what you think some of your differentiators are, and are they, would they see value if they have that capability? The other thing I recommend in the interview is to also, in addition to open-ended questions and really listening, is you want to put a few, questions that are going to give you quantitative input that you could track, like a yes or no, or, you want to have enough feedback to have what I call data-driven insights. So you need some very specific questions that you could almost do like a chart to figure out, how many people said yes, or how many picked, these 4 capabilities, they picked the top one. So you want to have, in addition to listening and open-ended questioning, a mixture of some questions that are going to give you enough insights for data-driven insights. Then it's really important to do them in person if possible. It's really helpful if someone else on your team is taking notes, because if you're taking the notes, if you're doing it in a Zoom, or you're doing it in a public place, it's always helpful for you to be engaged with the person being interviewed and someone else is taking notes. You don't want to just jump right in. You want to try and establish a rapport with whoever you're having this interview with. You want to try and listen without bias. And by the way, bias is a really big topic. I never really fully understood how big that topic was until I was a mentor at the I-Corps program, where there's an entire module just on bias, and we all have them. To read a little bit about bias, it's all online. You can read some of that stuff. And then you want to practice. You're taking up people's time. You may be talking to executives, and their time is really valuable. And so you want to make sure you are a little polished and, kind of are organized. And again, these are just early tidbits, and I can't stress enough the importance of joining the spring cohort of the Founder Institute, because this is just the top of it, and you're going to learn so much more. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to give you even more insights on this topic. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thanks, Rhonda. Just so Ryan and Rhonda, I don't want to answer these questions now and on the flow, but we do have a few good ones. So think about this. In a B2B to C scenario where you have different personas, where should you focus your initial feedback? Which is a great question. We get that all the time in our sessions. And another one that came through, incentives for customer surveys, pros and cons. And then maybe how many people do you really need to talk to before you feel like you have enough to say you're validating your idea, or the opposite, that you've learned enough and it's not validated. So like I said, we don't have to answer these right now, but we'll get to them. And Brian, if it flows into what you're talking about, just make it so.
Yeah, that's great, Daria. Let's take a few minutes right now to answer a couple of those questions. That first one was from James. In a B2B to C, where you have different personas, where would you focus your initial feedback? And maybe there's no right answer here. My perception is if you're trying to validate product market fit, start with the business customer. They're going to be the buyers, and without their commitment and buy-in, the solution is never going to scale. They're going to be advocating on your behalf to the customer. They're going to have some strong insights about the customer already they can share with you. So that's where I would start. If you're a little bit further along and you're working to improve adoption or retention, then you're probably going to want to focus on that customer. They're the ones who are going to make or break the continuation of your business. Let's see, we had a couple more questions in the chat. What's your opinion on running an incentive for customer surveys? Rhonda, you want to take this one?
I think everyone has a different opinion on this. I mean, I never, ran incentives. I tried to go to where customers were and get their input, but I don't have as much experience in trying to pay people to get them to give you feedback. I mean, I think where you pay people for their time perhaps might be a formal focus group. In that environment, I do think, they're typically, 2 hours, 3 hours long. You might want to compensate people for their time. Maybe filling out questionnaires, but I might not be the best person to answer that. So I don't know, Ryan, if you've had more experience with that, but focus groups.
Go ahead, Daria. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say in my former job, or my former company, we did incent our audience for in-depth interviews, which were 1 hour long and done by a third party, not part. I wouldn't say that would be something a startup would do, but I would think that as you move along and you get closer to your audience, doing that in-depth research with someone who was these were in the medical field and healthcare field, very busy people. So compensating them for their time at that stage made sense. So I would think if you're, if you're in a position as you're starting out your company and you need to talk to doctors, for example, or, CEOs of Fortune 50 companies, people are very busy, but you need to talk to them. And it's a small token, I think, would go a long way, given your status as a startup. And then as you grow and you need to dig deeper, that would something that you would want to build into your marketing and research budget. My 2 cents.
And just one last time on that, like if you only want to talk to CEOs of, small, medium-sized, large companies, it's going to get really challenging. You need to also really think through who are the influencers in this decision, because typically decisions are often not made by the CEO. They look to someone in a line of business or a particular expertise. So as you do your mapping of who are your customers, you also have to do, another term is fox hunting, is who are the influencers. You have to like hunt. You got to do like a whole map of this is the decision maker. Here's who's going to influence them. Again, it's very different B2B versus B2C. So there are different approaches. And then the B2B to C, I agree with Ryan on his answer. But I think the B2C has to be done in that scenario because you have to make sure that what you're offering has enough value for someone to pay for it. And it's only the C at the end of the day that is going to be the purchaser, even if they're buying it from like a reseller, right? You have to make sure that your solution is differentiated enough in the marketplace that there's enough value that they're willing to pay for it.
That's perfect. The last question, and then we'll move on to the second half of the presentation. How many people should we talk to before validating the need for the product? And you're going to get a wide range of answers here. I just went through this process last week again, and it continually comes up, but I like to work in increments of a dozen. It's a nice round number. I I go through customer interviews and then assess what I learned from that set of interviews. Do I need to pivot my questions that I'm asking, the thesis that I have, and do another set? And you want to go through a couple rounds of that before you feel like you have a clear understanding and enough traction to move forward and invest money in it. If it's a large scale consumer facing idea, you may want hundreds, but whenever possible, just talk to these people face to face over Zoom. Don't hide behind a survey. You're going to get so much more information, feedback from their body language. So you can get a lot from 10 interviews.
Right. And no one's going to like my answer. I think you need 100, so, and not all at once, right? As Ryan said, but and customer development is not a one-time thing you do up front. It is something you need to do at every stage, whether it's as you're adding new capabilities or features, getting feedback on here are the 5 we're going to invest in, which are the top 2 that you think would add the most value. You need to do this continuously. It is not oh, okay, check, I did my customer validation. It's a continuous part of your process, but depending on the size of what you're doing and the level of investment, I think you need to get to 100.
Thanks, Rhonda. Okay. In the second half of the customer development session, we're going to shift gears a little bit and focus on thinking about the problem you're solving for the customer. It's extremely easy to fall in love with the product or solution you're building and lose focus on the customer problem. This is even more true in the early stages of a startup when the possibilities are endless and there's so much excitement about the new idea you've come up with. The most successful startups and entrepreneurs have the discipline to take a step back and stay laser focused on the problem being solved for the customer. The solution or technology is secondary. If it's not solving a real problem for the customer, no one cares how innovative it is. They're not going to use it. There's a handful of ways to approach this. I want to share with you one surefire approach. So you've got a technique in your toolkit to take away. The technique is called the jobs to be done framework. This is something I use in any new product I'm building, any new project I'm taking on, regardless of it being a startup, an enterprise level project. This framework really grounds me in how I'm approaching the problem. There are 3 legs of a product opportunity. Think of them like a stool. The first, the persona. This is the target customer, the end user. And the second, the problem. What is it the persona wants to achieve? What are their unmet goals? And finally, the product, the solution to the problem the persona is trying to solve. The intersection of these 3 is where that product opportunity lies. That is a viable solution or business idea. And take note, order of these certainly represents priority. We're focusing in on the intersection between the persona and the problem in this case. What we're trying to achieve in the jobs to be done framework we're going to walk through together is to avoid falling in love with our solution. Customers have alternative ways of solving their problem, and we want to make sure we build something compelling enough to make a switch from their current solution to ours. And to do that, we need to stay focused on the problem itself. The jobs to be done framework focuses you on the problem. In this case, we're going to pretend the customer hires a product for a job that needs to be done. No different than if you need to put a roof on your house, you hire a roofer. We identify customer problems by focusing on the outcomes that customers want to achieve and not the product you want to sell them. You heard Rhonda mention it's about listening to the end user, the customers, and not selling to them early on. That's the case here. These jobs to be done can be broken down into two different categories. There's functional jobs, what the customer wants to achieve. You want a roof on your house. And there's emotional jobs, how the customer wants to feel. You want to feel confident when it rains that there's not going to be a leak in your roof and you're going to wake up to a puddle in your bedroom. In this framework, we're putting ourselves in the perspective of the persona or the end user, and we're taking ourselves through this statement. When I do a certain task, I want to achieve this thing so that I can have this desired outcome. So you're identifying the situation or the problem facing the end user, what's motivating them to solve this problem, and the outcome that they expect. This is the job your product or service is completing. In a sense, your product is applying to do this job for the customer. And the criteria can be a desired outcome. It could be an undesired behavior that they want to avoid. And as we're jotting down these jobs for our idea or our business, the more detailed the criteria, the better. The more detail, the clearer we'll be able to test that hypothesis. This exercise is very simplistic, but the idea is to reframe your thinking, to put yourself in the shoes of your end user and think about the problem facing them that you could solve. There's going to be a lot. So as you start this exercise, and just keep jotting them down, 5, 10, 20 of them, until you find yourself repeating jobs. That's a point when I usually feel like, okay, I probably have enough of a list to start refining, and you'll start to notice patterns emerging in the types of problems being faced by each type of persona. And then you group them and rank them in order of priority or importance to the end user. Once we've done that, we want to examine where our business, our company strengths intersect with these jobs. That's the beginning of the product opportunity. And not once did we mention a solution, any software, any technology whatsoever. In a moment, we're going to work through an example using Airbnb. As we know, Airbnb is a two-sided marketplace where they serve as a platform for travelers to find a place to stay and hosts to rent out their homes. And we'll look at this framework from both sides of the equation, for the guest and for the host. And in this case, they represent two different personas that Airbnb is solving a problem for. We'll start from the guest point of view. And as a reminder, the value proposition for Airbnb here, Airbnb offers me the comfort of being at home with the convenience and flexibility of staying in a hotel room, in theory. We're taking that framework that we just talked about. When I do this thing, I want this to happen so that I can achieve this outcome. We have an example here. When I use Airbnb services, I want to have multiple bedrooms so that I can stay in the same place as my entire party. And there are dozens. So we're going to take a moment, drop some in the chat, whatever comes to mind. And I'm going to share a couple others that are top of mind for me while we're doing that. How about when I use Airbnb services, I want to have home-like privacy during my trip so I feel safe. Again, this is an emotional outcome. When I use Airbnb services, I want amenities like washer and dryer and additional living space so I can feel comfortable. Aaron wants a hot tub so he can relax. We knew that. Any others that come to mind? You may find within a single persona, the first part of this phrase is going to be the same. When I use Airbnb services, when I travel, whatever that is. But these statements are exactly what Airbnb uses to inform product features and enhancements, to inform how they improve search experience when you're looking for a place to stay, the filtering as you're going through that process, the checkout process, the process of checking into a home. These are all informed from these jobs to be done. So we want a kitchen, so we can eat healthy. That's a great one. Freedom of bringing in friends, so you can enjoy time together. It's a good one, Gary. Although I don't know that hotels restrict you from bringing friends either. To feel like I'm at a relaxing getaway. Lots of friends. Okay. All right. Let's do that same exercise, but now from the host perspective. Again, as a refresher, Airbnb offers hosts a way to monetize or subsidize the cost of owning a property while not being occupied by the host. We're once again coming back to that very simplistic fill in the blank statement. Thinking from the host perspective, when I do this, I want this to happen so that I can achieve this outcome. And that again could be a functional outcome like generating money, could be an emotional one, a feeling. The example we have here is when I serve my clients, I want a way to safely give access to my property so guests will feel comfortable. That's an emotional outcome. Same thing, we're gonna take a minute, drop in the chat what comes to mind from the host perspective. When you serve your clients, you want this to happen so that you can get this outcome. Don, I don't know where you're staying, but none of the Airbnbs I've been at have valet parking. So Aaron wants to rent his spare bedroom to make some money. That's probably a good idea. I bet he's making good coffee in the morning. Provide a top-notch experience so the guests will rave to others in reviews to get repeat business. Yeah, these are great examples. Some others that come to mind for me, when I serve my clients, I want a secure payment portal so that I can avoid fraudulent payment behavior. When I serve my clients, I want a reservation management system so that I can easily keep track of open dates and book timeframes. When we've listed out all these jobs to be done and we've grouped them and we've prioritized them, we can see which problems will have an outsized impact for our customers if we solve them. We can identify which problems have less than satisfactory solutions today. We can see which problems we could conceivably solve with the resources and technology available to us. Even this example, wanting to safely give access to the property so guests would feel comfortable, there's a dozen ways this could be solved, all of which address the problem and add perceived value to the customer. None of which started by saying, I'm going to invent a way to allow remote access to the home, and I bet we can sell some home rentals. That sounds ridiculous, but that's often how we approach the problem solution scenario, with that solution in mind first, and then shoehorning it into a problem that we could solve. This is it, everyone. Really, once you've gone through this exercise of identifying your target audience's motivation and their desired outcomes, the problems that need to be solved, you have a set of hypotheses. And you circle right back to the methodologies that Ronda discussed at the start. Customer validation, those interview techniques to inform your next steps, either validating, informing a pivot, or causing you to rethink your approach entirely. And all of that costs $0. Costs nothing more than time and effort. And those two things, if you invest in this way, it's going to set you apart from 99% of the startups out there. That's it. That's the foundation. How you
And
solve the
actually,
problem.
Ryan,
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say there's one added item that we probably should also talk about that we didn't have on the charts, but I think once you do all this, the final step is going back and doing your competitive assessment. So like every startup thinks they have something unique and no one else can do it. And after you've gotten all this good input and really thought about, your capabilities and your positioning and what people need, going back and really taking a hard look at almost like a grid, with your capabilities, your competitors, and really making sure what you have is differentiated. Because I've seen a lot of startups, do all this work, but then they forget to go back out and look at the whole marketplace and see, is there anyone else doing this? And is how I'm doing it differentiated enough from how they're doing it? So, that I think it could lump into customer development is this final step after you get all this great feedback.
Yeah, that's spot on, Rhonda. And it just becomes a cyclical pattern of identifying these problems, validating them with real customers, not family, real customers. And once you prove that out, go back and understand what that competitive landscape looks like, how you want to approach it, validate that with the customer. It's a continuous cycle and can really avoid investing in the wrong areas by just a couple quick steps. Not quick,
Right.
simple.
And then doing that competitive analysis piece at the end really will help you as you're developing your messaging and your content. Because as you go out into the marketplace to start actually selling or marketing, you've got to be razor crisp on what your differentiator is. And that competitive piece will inform you on where to focus.
That's great. I love the jobs to be done framework, Ryan. Thank you. I think that was such a clear and easy way to kind of wrap your head around how to get going with it. And then once you start kind of writing down all those jobs, you get better and better and better at it. So that was terrific. Let's see. One more poll. We have some questions coming in. Hold on. So this last poll, last question, now that you kind of took in everything that Ron and Ryan gave to you, and we have some similar questions coming through here. Which type of customer feedback do you struggle with the most? Vague positive response, negative feedback that lacks detail, conflicting opinions? Are people asking for too many features? It's hard to focus. All righty. Excellent. It's look like when people seem interested but never take action is looking like it's going to be our #1 response here. And I think that relates to a couple of questions that came through. One are anonymous. What can count as a validated idea? Does that mean registering? I've signed up, or I've paid to be part of the platform, or what does validation actually look like? And then Jerome, for you, Ryan, has a question about, should you first complete persona questions. I'm going to go back. So that when you get to the real responses from the customer, you can gauge how in tune you were prior. How do you put the cart before the horse, I guess?
Yeah, you always want to start with that persona, and the order in that product opportunity slide was persona, problem, product, in that order. So the better you understand the audience, the target market that you are trying to serve, the better you can understand what their problems are and what's going to be valuable enough to them that you can solve. Yeah, good question.
One from EM. Any key tools or software most useful for customer discovery and executing the jobs to be done framework? I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm curious.
Well, I think it might be the same as Rhonda's. The key piece of software or tool is just your feet.
Yeah.
Getting out from behind the computer, going to find where your audience is and talking to them. There's no shortcut. And then the jobs to be done framework, you can do that on a piece of paper. Don't overcomplicate it.
And there are books written about this. I mean, you could go, there's YouTube's written about that out there. I mean, there is tons out there with different methodologies, different ways to go about it. You know, so there's a lot of material, but it's getting focused on and doing this in an organized way.
And then I don't think we got to the what does count as validated. You've talked to 100 people, you've talked to 10 people, whatever it is. You have your quantitative data, your qualitative data. You've laid it out. Do you need? How do you know it's validated? Is it that all those 100 people have signed up and paid $1 for your app, or you've got 10,000 followers on social media? Like, where do you know that you've crossed that stage? Or how do you know that? Ryan or Ron, or really?
I'll let Ryan. I mean, I think it's a continuous process. I don't think it's you finish this and then you go to that. I think you've got enough material and enough, you know, you're feeling comfortable. I mean, and as you're developing your solution, you've got to start to get some, what I'll call beta customers, right? And then they become your source to help you validate even more. Believe it or not, a lot of companies don't mine their existing customers. It's just crazy. Like marketing is like a straight line instead of a circle. And you really need, you know, the circle. Your customers become your best you know, folks to go to talk about, because they're going to tell you how they're using your solution in ways that you hadn't even thought about.
Yeah.
And they're going to tell you about problems that solve that you hadn't even thought about. So you have to have this continuous loop. So I just I don't think there's okay, now you've got 10, now go to the next step. I think you just keep, it's an iterative process, but you have to have enough mass to keep going to get out there.
Any other questions for our presenters here today? We are so excited that you joined us for our session, and remember that we have a lot more coming up throughout the month. And we hope that you found this informative and helpful. Please connect with Rhonda, Ryan, myself, Don, Bill on LinkedIn. We're all there. Follow our page, Founder Institute Keystone, on LinkedIn for all of our events. And if you have any questions about joining our cohort or want to learn more, we are here to help you. And thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Rhonda. Have a great day, everyone.